Hello, world. Welcome to the community screenings for The Way of the Psychonaut. My name is Mitch Schultz, and I'm joined by producer and director, Susan Hess. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Mitch. Nice to see you again. So today, everybody, we're going to be sharing a clip from the documentary, The Way of the Psychonaut. It will be a section of the film where Stan describes the 4 perinatal matrices. And then when the clip is finished, we're going to come back and Stan and Brigitte will join us and answer questions that have been submitted previously from audience members. So I hope you enjoy the clip and we'll see you shortly.
I was so far talking about non-ordinary states of consciousness, but I have been all these 60 years now interested in a very significant, large subgroup of these non-ordinary experiences, for which current psychiatry and psychology has no special name. They're all put in the category of altered states of consciousness. What it suggests somehow is that there's a correct way of experiencing ourselves and the world, and that in these states, it's distorted. We have to use this new psychology if we want to use effectively holotropic states. If we want to run psychedelic sessions or do holotropic breathwork, or if we want to work with people who are in spiritual emergency. You actually can find that the experiences, if you regress to birth, the experiences come in 4 patterns. I call them perinatal matrices, basic perinatal matrices. The first perinatal matrix relates to the situation of the fetus still in the womb before the onset of the delivery. This could be pregnancy, which is the result of planning, of the parents' loving expectation. The mother is physically healthy, is in emotionally good condition. Reliving of that kind of state could be a very ecstatic experience. Now, this doesn't necessarily happen. There are pregnancies which are a result of rape, of a one-night stand when both parents were drunk, where the marriage was broken, the mother is abused, physically and emotionally unhealthy. The pregnancy could be so unwelcome that there are attempts at abortion. Another possibility, the mother is Rh negative, the father is Rh positive, so that from the beginning, the fetus is being attacked, immunologically treated as an invader. Come 9 months plus minus, this is the onset of the delivery. First hormonal changes, which are then translated into mechanical contractions of the uterus. Each contraction compresses the arteries and interrupts placentary circulation between the mother and the child, which means no supply of oxygen, no nourishment coming in, and there's no removal of metabolic products. There's no resolution for it because the cervix is not open, just contractions of the uterus in a closed system. Now, with each contraction, the cervix is being pulled over the head, it's dilating. When it reaches the necessary size, then it's the transition to the 3rd matrix. The contractions continue with all the consequences, but the cervix is now open, so there is this laborious propulsion through the birth canal. Now there are tremendous pressures here, suffocation and the pain generate powerful energy, which has all the qualities of sexual energy. Our first encounter with sexual energy, we were inflicting pain on another organism was inflicting pain on us. We couldn't breathe. There were a lot of pressures and fear. This kind of experience then can become the basis of the development of various sexual dysfunctions, deviations, aberrations, perversions. And then we have the completion of the delivery, head first or feet first, and then the umbilical cord is cut. From then on, the child exists as an anatomically independent individual, still biologically, emotionally dependent, of course.
The matrices begin with unity, transition to hell with no escape, then to purgatory, with the end in sight, where you are the victim and the perpetrator and the observer, and finally culminate in freedom and a newfound sense of connection. Joseph Campbell is best known for his work in comparing mythologies and religions from cultures around the world. He met Stan in the late 60s at a conference in New York City. When Campbell heard Stan's theory on the 4 perinatal matrices, he instantly solved a mystery that had intrigued him for years. He couldn't understand how cultures from diverse geographical locations could share the same death-rebirth themes. He called it a monomyth. But when he saw Stan's presentation, he understood that these cultures were reliving the experience of their own births. The perinatal matrices, especially the 3rd moving into the 4th, served as the threshold for the hero's journey. The rites of passage that these cultures developed allowed their initiates to access unconscious birth memories, face their fear of death, and finally free themselves from a deep maternal dependency.
Birth itself is not only a rite of passage, but is perhaps the universal rite of passage that we all go through. Perhaps it's through that experience that we come into the world knowing deeply that if we are to succeed in the ongoing actualization of our potentials, whatever they are as individuals, throughout the life cycle for however long we live, we will need to undergo repeatedly similar rites of passage.
All right, welcome back to the community screenings for The Way of the Psychonaut. We hope you enjoyed those clips from Stan. And of course, without further ado, people that don't need an introduction, but I'll let Susan do the proper introduction for Stan and Brigitte Grof.
Hi, everybody. So it's my pleasure to introduce Stanislav Grof and his wife, Brigitte Grof. For those of you who don't know, Stan Grof is so well known for the 60 years of work helping us expand our understanding of the cartography of the psyche. And his wife, Brigitte Grof, is one of his first students in learning holotropic breathwork and helping to train facilitators around the world. So now we're going to be meeting Brigitte and Stan. Hello, nice to see you today. And I would just like to mention that we are recording this conversation. Stan had a mild stroke, and although intellectually his mind still functions perfectly, sometimes his speech centered, the words don't flow as easily as they did in the past. And so it's just more relaxing for all of us if we record it. So without further ado, welcome, Stan and Brigitte. And I'm going to read the first question that we received from our audience. And this is from Martin. I'm not sure I'm going to try to pronounce his last name. Dear Stan, is there any study which shows what is happening in the body during holotropic breathing? I mean chemicals, hormones, O2 and CO2 levels, and brain function. A lot of people are saying that it's dangerous. I would really like to hear your view on that. We met in Prague in 2017 during the big holotropic breathwork workshop, and I asked you you asked me what I do for a living. It kind of opened my eyes, and I'm trying to show the people the benefits of our breathing, on our breathing and our well-being. Much love and peace, and thank you.
No, we have contraindications where people should not do the holotropic breathwork. Mm-hmm. And before they come to workshop, we have a questionnaire where they tell what is happening with their body, and we will see whether they can come or not. Mm-hmm. Now the problems are not about the breathing; the problem are cardiovascular, because we never know how, particularly for the first time, how powerful the experiences could be, and so the emotions, can be really very difficult for the heart. So we would not like to have people who have blood pressure, for example, or
high blood pressure.
Blood pressure, yeah.
History of a heart attack.
Of course, stroke.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Arrhythmia. Those would not be good situations.
Yeah, but it's not that the breathing itself is difficult,
no,
dangerous,
no.
but rather the
If
emotions.
people are
Yeah.
physically okay, the breathing doesn't hurt people.
Right.
But
right.
you could have a birth experience or so, which would be really intense, right?
Yeah.
Physically.
So it's an emotional reaction to the material that comes up.
So it's not dangerous if people are in good
Physical, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing sports.
So we'll go now to the physiology of the
Yes.
of the breathing. Usually, people think when we breathe very fast that actually we get a lot of oxygen into your body and into the brain. But it's much more complicated in the body. For example, when we are breathing very fast, we are also breathing this dioxide, carbon dioxide.
Okay.
And this is acidic. So if you lose the carbon dioxide, then you have alkaline blood.
Ah.
And in alkaline blood, the hemoglobin is binding more oxygen in this hemoglobin, so that less of it is actually going into the blood
or into the tissues.
Now this is something that we have in the body, because if we do some very intense work, going somewhere into the mountains and so on, we create a lot of acidic.
I think in your notes you say metabolites, which are acidic.
Metabolites, yeah.
Okay, and that they're acidic.
And so you have then acidic blood.
Right.
And in this situation, then it releases a lot of hemoglobin, so that it helps us, how we can deal with the really intense exercises.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not the whole thing. Then actually, if you have alkaline situation in your blood, then the kidneys will complicate for it, and they will then excrete alkaline blood.
Wow. So the kidneys excrete into the urine more alkaline.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's sort of different things that compensate each other.
Right.
And then there's another situation that in different parts of the body you can experience vasoconstriction. And I have found out that this happens in the areas, part of your body, where during birth or some other traumas, you had blockages in those bodies. And so when you do
in the parts of the body.
In the part of the body, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, when you would have birth, when there is a lot of involved in
pressure on
brain in the head,
yeah,
then you would have constrictions when you are doing the breathing.
Okay.
But it can happen in some other parts of the body. So it's not just that it exists in that body, everybody, but it's depends on what the experience was in the breathing,
For the individual in terms of the birth process.
In the breath trauma, yeah.
Yeah, birth trauma. Wow.
So there's another thing, which is something that's called the dead space in the lungs.
Oh, dead space, yeah.
Which is the exchange of the oxygen and of the by carbonite,
between CO2 and oxygen.
So depends also how much of the exchange is happening. So when you, for example, do much deeper breathing, that there's much of an exchange of the oxygen and the carbon dioxide.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So to really find out what is happening in the body, you would have to very complicated laboratory and
examinations.
Yeah, it's not something that we can very easily find out. Now, so what should we think about it? I believe that if you see all these different complications there, that you probably basically would be in a kind of state in the holotropic breathwork that would be happening in some high mountains, where of course you have much less oxygen there, and you would compensate for it by breathing very fast, and you exhale these
CO2.
CO2.
Carbon dioxide. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is very similar to what people think is the disease of the high
Altitude.
Oh, high altitude.
the
sickness.
altitude.
Okay.
Now, but if you know, probably if people go there, that not everybody has been feeling poorly. You know,
Yes.
Symptoms.
there are people who actually feel ecstatic if they,
Right.
they are into the high mountains. But some people would have nauseated, and they would be having headache, and even throwing up.
Yeah.
So again, it's not something really dangerous, but you know, if you can survive. I mean, in altitude.
So Stan, I just want to say, I'm looking at your notes, and you also mentioned that the cerebral neocortex is the youngest part of the brain from an evolutionary
Thank you very much. Yeah,
perspective.
yeah.
And you,
So basically, if you have less oxygen, then the cortex, you know, is much more sensitive than the old part of the brain. For example, you can see it in alcohol. You know, people would first be hit with alcohol, would be hit with the
frontal lobes of the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the same situation. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and also you note
And
that. Go ahead.
what is important for us that actually it then has much more emphasis on the old part of the brain, which is including the something that has to do with suboctite. You know, so that's,
well, the unconscious processes are more available. You write.
Yes. Yeah.
When that frontal
subconscious, you know, rather than in the daily functioning. Yeah. So we know that a lot of these all things will be activated in the holotropic breathwork. You know.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Very complex.
Well,
now some people say, well, I mean, if this is true, if you have some situation, you know, when you are in the wild mountains and you have spiritual experiences and so on, well, there are people who live there all the time. For example, the Hindu people or the Tibetans in the
Himalayas.
Himalayas.
Then of course you have in Peru, for example, and we have seen the Ora people.
Oh, the Incas.
The Incas, the Keros.
So they live up above 5,000 meters. They just have villages there. So is it because they are so very spiritual there? But there is another complication, which is when people live there for a long time, there is a tendency to respond to it. So, for example, you start making more red cells.
Blood cells.
Blood, I see.
Yeah. They can adapt.
When you are in that kind of a situation, then from out of spleen, you know, comes a lot of this red, the red cells.
Red blood cells, yes. Fascinating.
But then again, they live a lot, you know, in these mountains where they were. So they were enormous hard work.
Yes. Work very hard physically.
So you know, again, things happening in both differentiate. So they're also in very beautiful places, you know, usually. So anyway, so what in the body, you know, there's a lot of complications.
Physiological
against each other. You see, homeostatic, you know.
Homeostasis? You mean the body's trying to balance itself as things are changing?
Different things are sort of compensated for each other, you know.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I think we should try to do it sometimes to take it to laboratory, but takes a lot of money.
Right.
And
actually, they did some of it. They're doing in Russia.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then I'm curious, Stan, because years ago when you were, and I think you speak about this later on, when you were testing people during psychedelic experiences, your first clinical trials trying to come up with pharmacology, how much psilocybin would create an effect, how much LSD would create an effect. You thought too, perhaps testing people all the time might keep them from having a deep experience. So I don't know if a lab environment would create the same deep access.
Well, I don't think you want to have your blood taken when you're in
Yeah.
to make a different
we were doing in Prague, you know, we were doing for when people were reliving births in with LSD. We had a way of with the colorimetric, you know, what was happening, how much oxygen, and it was fascinating that this was not happening just because of the LSD. It was happening only within the session we were reliving births. So suddenly, this is not something that's happening in your head, you know, that you are choking or so. It's similarly recreated whole body when you are reliving birth.
Well, see,
including the cells, it's amazing. Yeah.
And I think in a past conversation, you mentioned how people with multiple personalities, one personality is deathly allergic to a bee sting, and the other personality isn't. And that person, the person could get stung by a bee who isn't, and they're fine. But the personality that is can die. Wow. Am I right remembering that? That the physiology of the body changes based on which of the multiple personalities is active?
Some of those things were amazing. Where we would expect that everything's happening in the same blood, but there were people who, with these situations, some of the women, or they were mostly women, that they had, for example, great problems drinking with orange juice, you know, and the other person, when it's just another personality, subpersonality, then there's no problem with it. Or even more, that you can have one of the subpersonality that is colorblind, and you have special ways you can find out, you know. And one of them would be colorblind, and the other one has no problems.
It's just crazy.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is very fascinating.
Well, and it gets into the whole quantum aspect of all that, right? Like if you're in the same body, but you're having a different operating system registering that, the bee sting is a fascinating aspect of that too.
Yeah.
Talking about.
So Stan, I'm looking in your notes, and you also mention, you talk about the problem of psychological effects of LSD. And you say this is a substance with known chemical structures, and you can administer exact dosages, but you don't know the experience that it will trigger.
Yes.
And so, you say that both of these methods can induce transpersonal experiences with access to new information. Do you want to jump in on this? Because I'm reading through your notes right now.
Say it once more.
The LSD is also, facilitating transpersonal experience, but you cannot predict what will come. You know, like in the breathwork.
Oh yeah.
It's just sort of lowering the control, and then the unconscious will present what needs to be.
You know, there's very far from whatever is happening in the body with oxygen or best oxygen, with LSD or without LSD. There's a big way to the kind of experiences that happen with LSD or with the holotropic breathwork. You know, for example, you can have experiences where you become other animals, and you become in an ordinary state. You become as if you were that person. I think I talk sometimes about eagle, for example. The person who's experienced it as an eagle, they see the way of looking at the world, the way it will be happening with the eagle. They have different kind of eyes, much largest senses and close to the surface. And they can also, when they see something like a mouse at the bottom, they can zoom, which we cannot do.
That's fascinating. And I think what I was alluding to in your notes, I read a little farther on, and what you're basically saying is the brain isn't the source of these experiences. That, as Mitch was saying, that we're tapping into dimensions of consciousness that are beyond the human, which is basically transpersonal psychology. The idea that we are human beings capable of experiences that are far beyond our physical reality. And you mentioned also Aldous Huxley. And
well, the question was, is those things that we are experiencing in psychedelic sessions, are they actually in the brain? And Aldous, he had both LSD and mescaline also, and initially thought that what must be happening, that you activate some of the engrams in the brain, and that it comes out of it, the visions and so on. And then he realized it just cannot be true. That what is happening, that our brain is more like a valve,
a reducing
and
valve.
that there is an enormous sort of cosmic input, and that we couldn't take so much of it, so we basically have the brain, to be something that we can handle. And of course, we know that in non-ordinary states of consciousness, whether it's psychedelics or the breathwork, that we see much more. We have enormous capacity, of what we can experience and understand. And
so then maybe if people are psychic, that means that their filter is a little different. They have more. They can get more information that is available.
Yeah,
definitely. Well, and we were chatting with Rupert Sheldrake recently, and we were talking about our animals telepathic, and he was saying, yes, of course they are. That's how they communicate. He did
Rupert
studies.
has done a lot of work about it.
Yeah, animals.
Fantastic things in British television, that's showing what's happening with the dogs or cats and so on when the person, is coming home, and they have a television when they clip it, and they look what was happening when the person starts going in home, from an office or something, and then you can see that dog started very excited, and then comes exactly at the time,
to the door. I know we come home, and our dog or the cat is waiting for us at the window right next to our door. And now I'm realizing they haven't been there the whole time going, when are they coming home? They probably are like, oh, okay, let's go to the door. They'll be here in 5 minutes. So that's fascinating. I'm reading in your notes that you also mentioned this is similar to Ervin Laszlo's psi field or his Akashic field.
Yeah. That's another thing, this I have it also in the Psychonaut, that very likely, this consciousness is not in the brain, and so there are a lot of new things coming, particularly from physics, from new physics, and Ervin is, one of the best way of explaining what might be happening, Yeah. I think we're going to have it here. Actually, we can ask him about it.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. Well, so that's that's the end of that answer, I guess. Stan, is there anything you'd like to add before it's Mitch's turn? Does everyone want to take a nice deep breath and, you know, maybe have a sip of water or tea with milk and honey?
Well, I don't know. Well, I think again, you know, the most important thing is that that you don't have to worry about holotropic breathwork. I mean, if you take with some of the contraindications and so on.
Great.
Okay.
And you know, we wait for some really more complicated laboratories when they, you know, when they have to do it. But still, it would become exactly what the people are breathing. Do people faster? Do it by deeper, and so on. I think that would make a big difference. You cannot say just what is happening in the body with holotropic breathwork. You know, it depends on how you deal with it.
What the experiences are coming up and how that impacts them. Yeah, that's fascinating. All right. Well, I think Mitch has the next question for you, Stan.
Okay, great.
I do. Okay, so this next question is from Lynn. I will not use the last name. I am microdosing psilocybin and doing some breath work, both on my own. I live in Amsterdam, so it's easy to find the mushroom package from a trustworthy company or dealer. Is combining both okay in your opinion? It is wonderful to see you and see the one between you and Brigitte.
Okay, well, I would split it a little.
Okay.
I would say the first one is that there's no problem with psychedelics and holotropic breathwork. This is actually how I discovered, you know, holotropic breathwork. When we were sort of breathing faster to people who were not finished in psychedelic, and actually the clients were themselves asking me what to do with them, and as we were doing some of the physical things, then some of the people started breathing very fast. What's called Vastrika in Siddha Yoga, you know. And they told me then they found out with the faster breathing that suddenly they were already passing out of the psychedelic session. Yeah, it's already past waking down, but suddenly they were back in the middle of the session again. And I found out that breathing faster can actually activate the unconscious, you know. So that was a very important thing for the discovering of the holotropic breathwork. We have a whole thing we have it in the whole story. We have it in the
holotropic breathwork.
In your training, perhaps?
In my interview,
website.
In my interview, and in our website.
Yeah.
On the website,
from the training.
There's a whole, there's the whole story of how it happened.
And that's just so people know out there, Grof Legacy.
Involving Michael Murphy. Yeah.
Grof Legacy Training.
Grof Legacy Training.
And also in my interview, I explained it. I was telling the story.
So this is great to do the breathing when you're coming from a psychedelic session and you are not really finished. The very few people actually are using the bodywork when at the end, but you can do much better, much more fuller sort of psychedelic experience. Breathing, the breathing and the combination with the bodywork. So that's great to do. On the other hand, it doesn't have to make much sense to combine the breathing with the holotropic, with the psychedelic session. If you have access to it and you have a good side, you have a good guide, and you have a good stuff.
Setting.
Yeah, and you have a good substance, of course. then you just increase why would you combine the breathing and it's much easier to do it. Just increase the dosage. Now the other question was about doing both without
a sitter.
A sitter, yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's the first one was the small dosages of psychedelic, that's fine, If it's somewhere like 10 micrograms to 20 micrograms of LSD, or you have 0.1 or 0.3 of the mushrooms and so on, for the small dosages, that's no problem. The other problem is even with the not only substances, but doing the holotropic breathwork alone. We just don't think people should be doing it,
Right.
There are all kinds of different.
Best to have somebody there with you that might be experienced in leading people through
well,
that.
First
with
of all, you have to.
Yeah,
if you would be something very superficial, there's not make much sense. But if you would what we do normally with holotropic breathwork, then you can really get into very powerful places.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, you don't know when people are asking, "Can I do it alone?" You don't know, first of all, what kind of condition they are. Some people can be on the edge, and just the breathing without some support, you might get into really difficult problems. You have to, in a sense, be your own sitter.
Mm-hmm.
Again, wherever you're doing it, but there might be some kind of ambulance or something, and you create all kinds of stories about it. What's happening? You're dying, and they're coming to pick you up, or police is coming if you're not supposed to be doing it. So you need somebody like holding the kite.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who has a good reality and tells you, no, everything's fine, and until I tell you, you just can really go fully.
Right.
And you can get most out of those, both of course psychedelics, but also the holotropic breathwork. Now the other thing is we talked about these two different ways that you can work with holotropic breathwork. One is in dealing with some traumas that you can get out of them in the system, and the other one is where is something missing, somebody who had the experiences and let's say Bill was burned, was burned in the birth. There was no mother, and or was premature, and that person had to be there for 3 months in a plastic, bags or something like this, and they didn't get really touch with the mother. They were just getting needles, for infusions and so on. And others, there was just not enough support for mother. So if you get there in let's say even in holotropic session, you get to it and you're in that place, you're reliving it, and you find out that you are alone again. That is not
It's not healing.
Yeah.
It would be a re-traumatization.
It's re-traumatization. So you really need to human person there. This is also silly try to do it, from internet.
Yeah, online.
You really can.
Don't like the idea at all. It's not what it's supposed to be. Not safe.
Not the kind of a full, psychedelic breathwork.
Holotropic breath.
Well, Stan, I remember the guidance that we get, and Brigitte also, prior to a breathwork workshop, is to the sitters, do not get up and leave your breather during the course of the 3 hours that he or she will be breathing, because if they suddenly reach out for you and you're not there, you have just made
They always say that, yeah.
Trauma
Always
by
say that.
omission. You just made it stick even deeper.
And commission, it happens that when the person, like the sitter, decides to go out, like sometimes in SLM, they say, "I'll just come out and have a cigarette," But it's usually so that when this happens, that person gets to the place where they were just a tremendous experience as kids, and they were not really supported by their mother and so on, and they open their eyes and see that now it's different, and of course that person is the same in the whole big room where there's nobody than themselves. And so it's really important to have the person, to be there. That can there are certain of these kind of situations that can only heal when you have a person in present.
Yes,
I like the whole kite string connection. I think that's a great way to look at it, is just being able to hold somebody in general. And you never know when, like you said, the ambulance might go by, or some other connection could just create a story that doesn't allow for that healing process or re-traumatizes. And just to be able to fully let go, knowing that you have somebody there as the kite master, so to speak, I would imagine that makes a big difference in the experience, whether psychedelic or breathwork.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And you see in this, when we are doing it, there's a lot of people and so on. There is very frequently people would go and just start moving, sort of, when I'm really so much involved in that experience, that they go and they would go over other people and go over towards the wall and so on, and where we need to be there and really support everybody, so that everybody is safe. And if you would go just alone, particularly psychedelic sessions and so on, even at home, I mean, you can get really hurt,
Right.
Well, I think too of the physical part of it. You were describing earlier how in the breathwork experience that you can feel tension in parts of your body that were related to where pressure was felt during the birth process. Mm-hmm. And then I think about in some of my psychedelic sessions, memories of being beheaded, and then suddenly I've got horrible pain in my neck, or that the idea that if someone is there with you, you can ask for body work in that moment, and then it's released from the body.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, of course.
Our conversation with Brigitte the other day.
Yes.
We just were talking about it, how important the body work is,
So that it's fully released, not just emotionally, but then the memories that are held in the body.
Yes.
It's so really problem now when we have now new people coming, from psychedelics and so on, and they are in a like a university or something and you cannot touch people there. So when they do psilocybin and everything, they never can touch people really, or they have some kind of idea what you can do, sort of, So it's unbelievable. And you have to have medicine, and where you certainly do whatever you have to do, and suddenly here would be wonder whether you can sort of do something that people do in massage,
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell
but this is really going to be not very good results when you systematically don't do holotropic breathwork
the bodywork. The bodywork.
Well, bodywork, but also psychedelic sessions.
Yeah, but you do the bodywork also in the psychedelic session.
Yeah.
So
this
I don't know.
So important,
I don't know if I'm allowed to tell a story from a breathwork workshop, one of my first, but I won't give any real details. I just observed Brigitte holding someone and holding this person for a very long period of time. And it seemed so loving and so nurturing. And then later in the circle, when we were sharing, the individual shared that he had lived in a country that had been occupied by the Nazis, and that it was a terrifying experience. And then he said to Brigitte that he didn't mind this German occupation, that her holding of him healed that memory of distrust of the German people because of his experience of World War II and the Nazi occupation. So I just, that's an interesting moment where that physical contact was healing on a very deep level. I just thought that was really beautiful.
Well, those are the extremes, kind of extreme situations, but people in everyday life, they can very, very traumatic kind of experiences, like what we were talking about, somebody's come a premature baby and so on, or something happened, they lost the child, they lost the mother, or they lost the mother with child, and there's no mother. So in all kinds of situations, it's really essential to do this kind of support.
Yeah. Well, anything more before I go on to our next question?
Next question.
We're good? Okay.
I can't think about it, okay. Unless you have.
No.
I'm excited for this next one.
Okay. So this is from Jonathan. And my question is, if Stan and Ralph Metzner worked with John Lilly or tried LSD simultaneously with isolation tanks? If so, could you share anything memorable about in the tank? Also, did Stan know Nicholas Bercel?
Okay, well, I knew very well both of them, actually, for more than 50 years. And we get together just about the same time when I was coming to a conference in Amityville. And John came to the conference, and the question here was about the tank, floating tank, deprivation. But he was at that time very excited about LSD and dolphins. So that's what we talk about that conference. And after the conference, I need to go to New Haven, and I needed some who give me a ride. And there was a wonderful man, I still remember until now, it's Peter or Peter John. And I'll take you there. And as we were in the car, he said, but do you mind, I have to go to another place. Could be a couple hours or so. And I said, I'm in America for the first time. I want to see anything, so sure. And of all places, this was Millbrook. This was, at the time, this was headquarters of psychedelic experiences, And so I met Tim Leary, and Ralph was there. And we had several hours actually talking with Ralph. And this was the beginning of a great
friendship, yeah.
Friendship between us,
Yeah.
Now, but I try to ask, but I don't think that Ralph did any kind of cooperation with the deprivation, together with
John Lilly.
John. Although John has done about this LSD with dolphins and LSD without dolphins and things in the tank and with tanks and without tanks, ketamine and all kinds of things. So there are a lot of things to talk about John.
Stan, in your notes, am I reading it correctly that he was communicating with dolphins And that the dolphins were mimicking human voices? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes. Well, he was inspired by somebody who was neurology or neuroscience for other phases, the extraterrestrial. And so they were wanted how it would be, what would we communicate when somebody comes from another world. And so, this is a very, very intelligent animal, whatever it is, dolphins. So he was doing it, and there was a labyrinth that you had that actually created a whole laboratory which was inundated, where it was all water. And she was living there for, I don't know, like months.
Oh, this is Margaret Logeais.
The dolphin would be in the same kind of environment,
Margaret Logeais.
Yeah. And actually, what happened that they got so close with each other that they actually became very intimate, between this lady and. But anyway, she was doing with this. What you are saying, trying to find out if the dolphins can, if they can emulate somehow the human voice,
language. Yeah.
But they, of course, they have a different kind of pitch and so on, but they were getting exactly the response,
Mm-hmm.
and.
I have to say that
it happened several times. So what happened several times was fascinating. This was that they had like a laboratory language, artificial. It was no real language, that they created. And so she was doing it, and the dolphins were responding to it. And there were several instances where she was saying that and made a mistake and said correct. And then when the dolphin was doing it, he just didn't do this part which was wrong and waited just for the right one.
Wow.
And so John became very wild about it. He started thinking that they are more intelligent than we are, and finally let them go away.
Yeah.
Once you could, if they are so intelligent, how can they left caught? Once you are there, you are under their control. And then he had a situation which was the last thing. There was a pair, and the female had a pneumonia and died, and that male went down to the bottom and stopped breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize that they are not afraid of death even, and that's just couldn't work with them anymore and just let them go. There was one situation which was interesting, which was he brought into this conference, and that was a situation where there were a dolphin called Flipper.
It was a TV series.
Flipper.
I grew up watching it. Yeah, Flipper.
And then for the film, they were supposed to be shot, and they actually shot him. He was wounded, and then refused to communicate with people. And they gave them to John, and John put him into a pool and gave him 150 micrograms of LSD, and this what was it, laboratory or
assistant,
secretary, whatever, was there with the dolphin the whole time, and both they loved to supposedly flip under the arms, So they loved that, and she was doing it for a few hours there until the sun was waking off. And then he remained and continued communicating with not with her, but with all other people as well. The other interesting thing was with John was that he was taking LSD with them in their environment. And I mentioned that there's a possibility that when we have psychedelic experiences, that we can identify the identification with the animals. Mm-hmm. And so he claims that he really became like the Alphins, the dolphins. And understood this their world, which they don't have very good eyes, but they use the sonar. So the whole world of there is just from acoustics signals. They not do what we do so heavily on.
Well, they're relying, they're relying on the space around them.
And so he at one point we for a couple of hours he was explaining to me what it is like to be in the world of the dolphins. Mm-hmm. I somehow didn't have the chance, unfortunately. It would be really interesting.
Wow.
Now, but we're going to the dolphins and LSD, but the question was about the tank.
Isolation tanks, yes.
So John started with this, I think, in 50s already. Mm-hmm. And it was actually the reason why he started doing it. He needed this for military, mm-hmm. because there were situations where there were soldiers who are in the solitary outpost somewhere, alone, and with very, very powerful non-ordinary experiences that they were doing. And there were some others even more important, which was some of the pilots, very important pilots, who were flying very far alone again. I think there was one who was actually going over Russia at one point that was shut down. So they were also going for very long distances, and there is a phenomenon which is called the
breakout phenomenon.
There's a empty
cockpit syndrome.
And the other one is another one, bro.
You have breakout phenomenon and empty
breakout, and again when they are there and they just look into that situation there, and you don't have quite interesting input of other things. Mm-hmm. It's monotonous and so on. So they just do some really absolutely crazy kind of situations. So they needed to do this. So he started
to practice. To practice.
Yeah. So he started. This was the reason why he started this. And then when he came, when I came to Baltimore, to Maryland, the first 2 years we created a new center, the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center, and so there was this wonderful group of people, about 8 people, all interested in psychedelic, including Walter Pankey and he came there and was there for quite a few months. I don't remember exactly. And he created, in this new center, he created a full-blown sensory deprivation. It was like over 2 meters or so, mm-hmm. full. It's in darkness, no sounds. You have to have the temperature about just a very, very, yet very little above or below water in
body
the body
temperature. Yeah.
Body, yeah. And you can stay there a long time. You can actually have clear your autism and it's on intestines, and you can pee because there was a filtration. It was moving very much like an embryo inside of it. So it was possible. There was also kind of
a mask.
Well, you had a mask and you had a tube,
Okay.
Breathing.
So again, you were just floating inside like an embryo, and so you can be for hours there, and those were quite powerful types of experiences.
And did he do that while he was taking LSD ever?
Ketamine.
Well,
ketamine.
Sure.
As I was saying, he was doing his in the tanks with psychedelics and without psychedelics.
Yeah.
With tanks and without tanks.
Yeah.
With tank and without tank.
Yeah, we have some wonderful pictures. Yeah.
Anyway, you might be interested in the center itself. Which we had this group about eight people who were there. Bill Richard was there, and Walter Pankey, and
I see Al Curlin. You have in your notes Al Curlin, Charles Savage, Sanford Unger, Sid Wolfe.
Yeah, Curly Unger, yeah. And this Al Curlin, wanted to create a new center in Maryland, and we said, why don't we create it specifically for non-ordinary states of consciousness? And so we could actually sit there and create that for the center. So we were making jokes about it. We said one day there's going to be a Manhattan project, for where we put all this effort into non-ordinary states of consciousness. This would be there. I mean, the center is already built. You can see it. You probably don't have it here. You have it I think you have it in the.
I have an image.
The movie.
I'll share it with them. Yeah, we'll get
so
that.
So this was like four floors, and on the fourth floor there were animals. On the third one was a really fantastic biochemical laboratory there. Then on the third, this was the clinical place. We had our offices, and also we had two special rooms for which were for sessions. And there was a television which was on both sides, and we had students who could watch when we were having sessions there, when people wanted it and they were doing something interesting, talking or some kind of movement and so on. They turned it off and recorded it. We had over maybe 260 of these
filmed sessions. Wow.
Videos,
yeah.
Of really, really important parts of the sessions. There was something really major happening.
Wow.
And so this was the room, and then we had the administrative was on the floor, and then there was actually in the basement there was an amazing laboratories. There was for sleep, one was for hypnosis, one was this tank, and then Jean Houston. She had the overload
sensory overload machine.
Yeah, and then she also created somehow with Bob Masters. They also created what the witches were using in Middle Ages. The
witches' cradle. Yeah.
When you sit on on there's a special kind of rope there.
Wow.
And you sit there, and it's moving by what's happening physiologically when you have the heart is coming, the aorta, or the sort of tapping in the system, and so you get going up through Brownian movements, that kind of like this, and you gets into states of non-ordinary states with that.
Fascinating.
So it was all there, amazing, you know, and then of course, you know, ended up with a whole complicated situation, but it's now done for something very, very different. Where actually Walt, basically John's tank is now the last time I saw it, they were using it for the potatoes.
Storing potatoes?
Potatoes for the kitchen, yeah.
For the kitchen.
They didn't think it was interesting. And when we had this, let's say 360 of these videos, and they just changed it because they were using some kind of verbal therapy there.
For recording.
And so they took this just over,
recorded
just,
over it
for the film, you know, MPEX, and they just so it's gone, it's all gone. You know, people, cancer patients, and the
very sad.
Psychiatrists, psychologists.
Yeah.
And,
Wow. Well, I think that what a fascinating journey for John Lilly that was. And
so I hope that today, you know, there are people who have a lot of money. If somebody would be interested, you can go there and start, you know, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right.
Created a special center created for.
We can try to communicate with potatoes.
Potato consciousness.
Potato consciousness, yes.
So I think we have another question here, and Mitch, would you ask?
Sure. No, thank you first off for that description and that history, because I've had the opportunity to get into some flotation tanks and try some psychedelics, and it is a very special and quick experience to jump into, and it's absolutely wonderful, and it's amazing to see John's work kind of getting brought up again quite a bit because of the flotation tanks. There seems to be a big movement that is opening up for that. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Well, he created, initially he was one which would look very much like a coffin, you know, kind of dark. And there was the magnesium sulfur. It's in the, what is it called? You know, you had just about this much of it, and just so it was not great. But then he created a very fancy one, which is called Deluxe, and he called it the White Whale, and it looked very beautiful, like a flying saucer, you know.
Wow.
So.
Very cool.
That's great.
A lot of people were getting it who had the money for it, and I think it's still probably doing it.
Oh yeah, people are doing it and creating brand new ones that are, you know, kind of cutting edge and all integrated with computers for their filtration system and temperature and all of it. So
it's just so amazing if you think about it. Is, you know, people were not interested in that tank being there, you know, and they didn't think that it was interesting to have those 360 videos of psychedelic sessions. That it was more important to people, you know, verbal therapy. They had just for the impacts, you know.
Right.
It's amazing.
All right. Well, are you guys ready? Yeah, definitely. Are you guys ready for the next question? I don't have the person's name here, but I can jump in if you're ready.
Yes.
Sure.
So I love it. Dear Stan, thank you so much for all of your work. During breathwork sessions, how do you identify if someone is going through a birth trauma memory? Is there anything particular that you look for, like specific movements?
Well, I can take it, you know, the way I came into it, because obviously I had no idea that there would be a birth trauma in the unconscious. all the people in universities were saying that it's not possible. And we actually initially started not even focusing particularly of the contents of the experiences. It was all pharmacology, was happening. So we had, I think, about 40 people who were mostly professional. They were biologists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and so on, chemists. And we had different kind of psychedelic substances there. There was LSD, there was psilocybin, there was mescaline, and we get also some of the tryptamine. I think I told you at some point that it was created in Hungary. That we started every years we put for the first time playing with it. And so people come for one day with one of those substances, and there was also one from placebo. And we just had doing all kinds of things, the thing on every hour, on the hour, like blood and urine and the psychological tests, things, the physiologic,
EEG, yeah.
And anyway, so we were then bringing some people from schizophrenic patients matched, with these kinds of people, finding out if people have in psychedelic sessions, if they go somehow very in the same direction with the values that we have in psychedelic sessions. That if it starts similar to the schizophrenic patients.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this point, we were not interested about the content because we just didn't have enough time to see people, between all those kinds of laboratory examinations. But I became very, very fascinating there in something that there was an amazing inter-individually and intra-individually variability. That if you have people, coming in the same kind of substances, in the same kind of a situation, in the same circumstances, that everybody has a completely different experience. Quite wild, And the other one also, if we would repeat the same substance, even like 2 weeks from one time to another, that we get a completely different, different experience. And then I realized this is not pharmacology, because if pharmacas would respond like this, you could not have pharmacology. You have to have some idea what people get, If somebody wants to sleep, and you give them something, quite a few people should be sleeping there.
Mm-hmm.
And, they do one that people can throw up, So because you have some idea that you get what you from the substance get, whereas here we had absolutely no idea what's going to come up when you take LSD or psilocybin or whatever. And at this point, I just completely lost interest in pharmacology, I think. And it's still a lot of it is happening now.
Mm-hmm.
I just became really interested in taking it to clinic. I realized that what we are really is not studying the substances, that we are experiencing the psyche on a very deep level. We don't have LSD experiences. We have our own psyche experiencing stirring up, And so I was in this clinical department, and then I became specifically interested in just what people were experiencing. And we started kind of medium dosages, like maybe 105, 200 or so, and a number of these sessions. What then was done in America and Canada was mostly what called psychedelic sessions, which were very big dosages and just allowing three of those sessions. So we were doing this, and at the beginning, a lot of these experiences were coming with like on kaleidoscopic images. I believe now that it's what's called fractals, And then as it goes going deeper, then we started having almost like a psychedelic, like a psycholytic. Or, it's like a Freudian kind of an experience, Suddenly you have experiences coming from childhood and so on. And as we continued, suddenly completely different happened. And people suddenly started experience tremendous anxiety. They started having the feeling that they couldn't breathe. They had nausea and so on. Actually, to the point that they thought they were dying. They're telling, listen, this is not a session anymore. We better go and bring the ambulance here, And of course, being a doctor, I would sort of go and check the pulse. But that didn't help because it was going like crazy. And it really was conceivable that this was some kind of a, really dangerous kind of a situation. And then I started trying it myself, at home and so on. And I realized that when you go into this really bad kind of a experience, that you can break through it, and it actually has a fantastic experience out of it. So we just stayed with it and continued. And so this was when we started to realize that what was opening up was the memory of birth, the biological birth. For a while it was not quite clear, but one after the patient, particularly as this was a more number of the sessions, or when we started increasing the dosages, then we got into reliving of birth. Now the problem is there that it doesn't come a linear passion. If you had the idea that somebody comes from the womb and then it gets sort of come together and then you struggle and then it comes out, but you get let's say different parts of it, different stages. And so it took me a while before I realized that there is a whole linear kind of a progression there. And I break it out into 4 different stages. I started calling them basic perinatal matrices. One of them being when you are in the womb, before the onset, before the birth begin. And if it's a really good womb, then you have a fantastic kind of an experience, a blissful kind of an experience. And then when it starts going to the second matrix, then suddenly it comes the kind of a claustrophobic situation. So suddenly you can breathe anymore. You have tremendous, pressure. There is a triad. We are talking now internally. The experience is a triad, which is I'm going crazy. I can never get out of this. And the other one is I'm getting crazy. So crazy, I'm dying, it's crazy, and this is a situation that you can never get ever out. Mm-hmm. And so this is the really bad one, the second matrix. And then the third one was a situation where the cervix opens up, and then there is a compression, getting out through the womb, and there are also all kinds of very interesting things. Part of it actually. You get a lot of energy, which is very much like sexual energy. So a lot of sexual images. There is a lot of violence. Could be some things that are coming with war, revolutions and so on. And then the last one is coming out. So if you know these kinds of four matrices that you can get sense when it starts having, you can look at some of those things just on outside, even if somebody who has not access to the inner kind of experience. But you can say some things. For example, when things looks like a baby, blissed out and so on, and maybe puts finger, into the mouth, and salivating and so on, and going into these kinds of situations. You can see it. I have seen something also very interesting than in that situation. For example, some women would go to the checking, what's happening, and they found out that they don't see breasts when they experience like a being regression, we gain erection, that they cannot feel the breasts. And males would come to the bathroom. They found out that the penis was shrinking the way you recreate, what it was like at that time. There were things in certain stages. They suddenly can see that, for example, people who had a forceps, they suddenly can see the
marks,
the images.
You see the marks,
the marks. Although they didn't touch, nobody touched them face, and you can see perfectly the cervix, on the face. Or here, when there was an umbilical cord, then you can see that it's the head up to this point is blue and down is okay. So you would
cry like babies with the sound.
So if you are already fully developed that kind of first experiences, then you can see these kinds of things really in extreme. But sometimes you can just come the first part, and you have to, just see that you are beginning something that would develop in something that would really is like a full-blown birth experience.
But also the people would be pushing with the head, no?
Yeah, that's another thing. Women actually very frequently see pushing with the head, and they bring some pillow or something against it, and they want to push against it, and then alternatively they go and stretch their legs, and it seems like they're pushing something from the womb out. So it's interesting how these things happen simultaneously, being born and giving birth.
Right.
I think we have some really interesting pictures, Susan, in the movie. The experience of being born and giving birth and giving born.
Well, we shared the clip at the very beginning of this, Stan, that shows the birth process. I mean, it's the full explanation of the perinatal matrices, but so much of the art that people painted after their experiences, we intercut that into the edit. But some of the art's amazing.
I see this one picture of this woman giving birth to herself. Right?
I know.
That's so beautiful. I think that's very strong.
So Annie, so look at this question. So you can have two ways of looking at it. One is if you are a sitter and you just have to find out what's happening to the person, then you just have to look from some of the external things, which is a little more complicated, but not very much. When, for example, somebody is reliving the birth, you can see the struggle, and sometimes the head is going back like this, and then you can see the relics, and suddenly a totally different kind of situation. You know, the person sort of looks like a baby, and maybe looking for hand and so on.
And also, it's typical of the turn. They turn in the birth.
Yeah, that's, you know, there are different ways depending on where the fetus is. There are certain torsion and co-torsion and going down and going up. You know, at the final stages. For example, it's the situation where people want to, you know, pull out. So you can see recreating that whole situation, and that happens to the fetus being born. And so that's from the outside, and then the other one is, if you are in it, and then you have to find out, and that I think particularly with already know some of the 4 stages that we are talking about. You can probably help you with that, but a lot of people discover it even without this already knowing what you expect.
Yeah. So from either the experience itself or from somebody sitting there, you can start to identify maybe what they're going through or some of the external aspects of their experience, and be able to guide them through if it's kind of the first or second or third or fourth, even depending on what the person on the sitter is experiencing or watching, actually. It's fascinating, especially going back and seeing things differently. Yeah, go ahead.
I cannot believe now that psychiatry doesn't really accept the fact that there's a birth, you know, in the unconscious. I actually create this kind of picture that you see there, the four pages. This was over 50 years in Amsterdam, and for the first time I was showing it. And so it took over 50 years that psychiatry does not accept, you know, that there is a trauma of spending like sometimes for 40, 50 hours, you know, and if you look at the babies when they come and what they look and so on, that you cannot see that there was a trauma in there. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's a really, what you are saying is a kind of schizophrenic, you know. They think the 50 hours or 20 hours of that struggle, you can't remember. It's not recorded, but then the moment the baby gets out and looks at the mother, that is so meaningful. This influences all your life, you know. And so it's like, why would it be from one second to the next that?
This is accepted in the psychiatry.
Yeah,
that is essential. Yes. That when the child is born, that looking into the eyes of the mother. This could influence the whole life of the relationship between the mother and the child.
But before, if you have the umbilical cord around, you almost died, or you died and you came back, or anything, that has no influence, you know. But then you look at the mother, that's the influence. So it's really weird.
But the problems, you know, the psychiatry actually would be very, very different if we realize that the trauma is there. I mean, we would understand much better what is happening, and we would have much better way of therapy, you know.
And just a really quick question, Stan, do you think a home birth, or the kinds of birth that when women are in like a pool and so the baby is delivered into water, are those more peaceful experiences that help diminish the kind of trauma that is experienced by the fetus? And
I think it's amazing. Yeah. I've seen some of these deliveries, and what you see this when the fetus comes out, it can be for maybe 20 more minutes underwater, and the mother can sort of just holding the body, to their hand and so on. So we basically recreate the whole situation in the womb, which was that the situation of being in the womb is very similar as being when you're out and you're in the water, and also it's very similar than when you are being nursed. Just again, it is very similar situation inside of the womb and on the birth, because you have the connection
of the breast
of the body, but you have also the connection with the fluid.
Yes.
You have in the womb you have the blood coming, and then you have the milk coming. So very frequently people are reliving what we call this the first matrix. You have the experience of being in the womb with the mother, and then you shift a little, and you realize that it's very similar to like being on the breast,
Yeah.
And so if you have good nursing, for example, that you are actually, in my understanding, you are healing the trauma, the birth trauma.
Well,
because it's really like created almost like the pre situation. A lot of being held, and then things coming of the fluid inside.
Yeah, that's a very lovely thing to share, the importance of breastfeeding when possible. Not all women are able to do that, and there are ways that you can kind of fake it, but I think it's just the contact and the skin to skin and the holding, which is so important. Well, Stan and Brigitte, those are such deep and meaningful responses to these questions. And I think, Mitch, this has gone very in depth, and we're about an hour and a half into our recorded answers. Perhaps we could print the rest of Stan's responses. There were a couple of questions we didn't get to. We could do that.
Absolutely. We can share those on the Facebook stream. And so we'll make sure that those questions, if the people that did answer those questions, that they'll still be answered, and we'll have those out in text form. And you're right. Again, this was just an absolute pleasure to sit with you guys and hear the history and the experience and all aspects of this. So I thank you so much for joining us and doing this.
Yeah.
It would also be, in a much better in the Psychonaut, in the books.
That's true.
Right. Don't forget the books, everybody. The Way of the Psychonauts are out there, the double edition. So please check those out.
Volume 1 and 2.
Volume 1 and 2.
So, all right, everybody. Well, thank you, Stan and Brigitte. Thank you, Stephen Tucker and Matt, for being part of this. Matt gathered the questions from our audience and shared them with us. And so once again, just lovely. Much love to you both. And many thanks to those who've tuned in and watched us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.